I'm back. It's not morning anymore. It's definitely afternoon. 1:23 in the afternoon, and this is your morning wake up call, your morning motivation to get your projects done. And I wasn't online at all yesterday. I didn't have the 7 o'clock and didn't have the morning feed and didn't post a video. I just had a whole bunch of stuff that we had to get done. We had a very cool soccer game my son played in. They ended up winning. But the interesting thing is that the everybody got kicked out, not the players, all the parents. The coach on the other team was arguing with the ref, and so they kicked him out, and they uh, gave him a red card, then told him to leave, and then he didn't leave, and then they said, okay, well now everybody has to leave because he won't leave, and this just a sad state of affairs. It's like when they kick people off planes. One guy's acting to one guy or girl or whatever is acting up, and you know that they're just going to come get removed from the plane. But when they do it, they make everybody else leave the plane. I'm like, no, we don't need to leave. We will help you get this person off. If they are causing trouble and they're causing a scene and they want to show how tough they are or how right they are, and they're going to realize that they're not, we will help you get that person off. Don't make everybody else get off the plane so that you can handle this one person. One person against all of those people is not going to be a thing at all. Believe me, there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people on that plane that will help you get that person off the plane. Same thing with this coach and all this. It's just nonsense. All the rest of us don't have to suffer because one person is acting up. So, but that's not what we came to talk about. We came to talk about the video that I just put up, which is 327 versus 5.3 liter, which is very, very cool. Both of them very, very similar displacement. And it was done really to kind of show how far we've come since everybody looks back fondly at the muscle car era, and they should. Awesome stuff back then. Very, very cool, iconic kind of muscle cars. This was one of the high water marks, the only one being offered that made more power than this, or at least advertised power in our whole gross versus net rating kind of thing. Was the 375 horse version of the 327, was the highest rated factory small block, but it did not actually make that much because I tested both of them. I tested the fuel injected version, which is the 375 horse, and the 365 horse version, same motor, just with a carbureted induction system. And neither one of them actually made that power. They were close. They were within 10 or so of what their rated output. And when we ran them with headers and good exhaust and an electric water pump and all that stuff. So about as good as you could possibly expect for those things with the right camshaft and compression and cylinder head and all that stuff. And they did very well. And then we compared that to was the best of the best kind of thing. We compared that to just going to the wreck yard and getting a junkyard 5.3 out of a truck and then running it. And they both made very, very similar peak power numbers, but they did it at 100 RPM or 1,000 RPM difference. Though the one of them, the 327, made peak power at 6,300, and the truck made it at 5,300, which is what you would expect from a truck because you want all of that power, but you'd want it at a much lower RPM range where you're going to be operating a truck. The truck made more peak torque and more average torque down in the lower RPM range, which is what you'd expect. Much better cylinder head, very much a milder camshaft with 50 degrees less duration. Roller cam stuff, it had much better cylinder heads. Roller cam, it had a windage tray. The intake manifold is far better. It had, factory roller rockers, if you will. And so lots more technology going into the newer stuff. And that's kind of what I wanted to show. Because quite honestly, if somebody was building original reproduction or even a version thereof of the 327, they're not going to be looking at the junkyard 5.3. And and by the same token, a person that's going to get a junkyard 5.3 is not going to be going to the wrecking yard and looking for an L76. They won't find it, obviously, but they wouldn't even probably be considering that. They would be considering just the 5.3 or the thing. So we get different kinds of guys that comment on this stuff. One is, oh yeah, we're so much better now than those boomer things, and they get that sort of nonsense and not understanding that we need to look at where we came from, and that it was relatively cool. My little Dodge Omni GLH that was rated at 146 horsepower is a fun little car, but it's nothing compared to what things are now. You have 2 or 3 or 400 horsepower, whatever, all-wheel drive versions of these little, although they are considerably heavier. But you have much more powerful, much more sophisticated, much more complicated, in my opinion, versions of this little kind of hot hatch, because everything has gotten better, and that's what happens. But that doesn't make that thing any less cool, and it doesn't. And even if it did, it doesn't make it any less cool to me. I think it's awesome. So, and that's really what I care about when I'm choosing the thing for me. And it's the same thing with these deals. A guy that has a 65 Corvette, 66, 67, has that Corvette and that had that engine offered in it. He doesn't care about a junkyard LS, even if it's better, even if it can ultimately make more power. And then the video went on to show that if we modify both of them, airflow research heads on the small block, and then ported stock heads or a 205 like trick flow head on the 5.3, that they both can make lots and lots of power if you want to go that route. And quite honestly, if I did that on any of them and you were trying to make a lot of power, I would either run way more displacement than either one of them had originally, or I would just run boost on them, and you can make a bajillion horsepower with both of them. So, but it is interesting to hear. I like hearing the talking heads out there in comment world. Oh yeah, small blocks are terrible, or small blocks are the best, or whichever extreme version that they're taking to try to make their point, because whatever thing that they chose is the best thing. And not only is that good, not only did I choose that, but everybody else chose the wrong thing, because that's the only way I can make my choice be validated and make me therefore look really, really good. That's just utter nonsense, obviously. So that video is up, so make sure to please take a look at that. And then we are also taking a look at, let me scroll back here and see where we're going. We're also taking a look at stuff that I have upcoming. So we have obviously lots more tests upcoming. So I'm going to go ahead and see. Oh, the other thing I was reminding myself, we have obviously more turbo tests coming, and the Dodge and all kinds of cool stuff. But the other thing that I wanted to cover today is blower kits, do-it-yourself blower kits. So let's talk a little bit about that, because the nice thing is now if we go to the wrecking yard, which is where we find all of our good stuff, and we find all of these factory supercharged things that originally had superchargers on them. The cool thing about that is obviously not only can you turn them up on their factory applications like the 3800 that we have, like a 03 or 04 Cobra or a Lightning or a GT500 or any of the factory LSA, factory GM blowers, all of those things. Not only can you take and make those better, turn those up, you can add a turbo and compound it, but you can also take and apply those things to something else that wasn't lucky enough to be to be configured from the factory, to be blessed by their factory with forced induction. So you can apply these blowers to other things. And the problem is never the blower. I mean, the blower's there, and really with a blower, all you have to do is get it lined up so that the pulley is lined up with whatever you're doing with your crank pulley. So that's the first job, is make sure that the belt will work and it will drive the blower and you have a tensioner, all that stuff. The next thing though is, in order to do that, you're going to have to bolt it on to your motor somehow. So however you do that, you can remote mount it off to the side and blow it through an intercooler. You can, and this would be more normal, put it in the V of a V6 or V8 engine, as God in nature intended it to be. And then you can, and if it came with some sort of factory intercooler brick that was located underneath the blower, not uncommon, you could try to include that and package all that. But the way that they do that, and the thing that is most difficult about doing these kits, is whatever adapter you need to go from this blower, however it bolted on, to whatever your intake manifold is. Sometimes it can be as easy as, and we saw this a lot back in the old school days, is guys would simply make an aluminum plate and then bolt a supercharger onto the aluminum plate, and then bolt that aluminum plate onto like a 4-barrel manifold. Now we can do that, and guys do that, like Tom Demuse did that, the Demuse engineering adapter stuff for the LS, to put the GT500, either one of the GT500 blowers or the blower that I'm showing you, which is a 2.3 liter that they use in the 5-liter Coyote kits from Ford Racing. he used that to bolt it to either an adapter and then basically a big open common plenum kind of lower manifold that I think was originally Magnuson. But he also makes it so that, like I did, where you can bolt it to the top of a Holley high ram. So the nice thing about that is any other high ram that Holley makes for other applications, small block Fords, for example, Hemis, that you can put this on there. Now, I don't know about those other applications, whether it's going to line the snout up, but he's probably working on that. But the same thing applies to something that you would want to do. If you can make your adapter plate or adapter box, if it has to enclose the intercooler, make that, and it's just a square thing with mounts, that mounts to a carbureted intake manifold. You want to put it on an old 2.8 liter Ford V6 or any of the 3.7 Fords or any other, an aluminum 215 V8, whatever you want to put it on, even a little 4-cylinder, you can cut off a factory manifold and weld a plate on there, weld the blower on there, not weld the blower, but you could weld the plate on there or weld a flange on there so that you can bolt it on there. It'll look like the old Jackson Racing stuff that they used to do for the Hondas and for the Focuses. So you could do stuff like that. And the nice thing is you can go get but you have to be careful here, because here's the thing. You're like, oh yeah, I can go get a blower for $100 or a few $100, whatever your local auto parts store sells it. You're like, I can have a blower kit for $100 or a couple $100. Yes and no. There are going to be other things that are going to be required with that. Obviously, you're going to need some sort of drive pulley, some sort of tensioner. You're definitely going to need bigger injectors. You're going to need a bigger pump. You're going to need to fabricate whatever you need to do to mount the blower to your manifold. There's going to be some machining. So it's no longer like a $200 or $300 like blower upgrade. That's just the blower. And while we want to trick ourselves into thinking stuff like that, that's not really the reality. I mean, you got to be honest going in. That's a lot of times how we get so upset and disappointed with this, performance, these performance modifications that we make, and this industry in general is that we go in thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be cheap and easy. And it's never either one of those. Sometimes it's better than others, but usually it's more time consuming and more money consuming than we first envisioned, or maybe that we would like it to be, or trick ourselves into thinking that it's going to be. It always takes more time and effort and especially if you're doing something brand new. If you're doing something that's not been done before, it's definitely going to take, if you're duplicating something that's already out there, that usually takes less time. If you go on YouTube and someone says, hey, you need to do this and weld this and at this angle and move this over this much, and you just go and duplicate that after somebody's already done it, that usually takes less time than you figuring out where all of that stuff needs to go. Because as you're measuring for the blower, oh, look, this puts the pulley right here. And then you go, okay, yeah, this will work really good. And then you look underneath and you're like, yeah, oh, half of the discharge in the blower is now covered up. So I cannot do it like that. Now I have to figure out another way to do it. So as you cure one problem, you create another and another and another. And then it's just like hurdles. You're just going over the next one and over the next one and over the next one. And eventually you finish the race and you win, and you have a blower on your whatever new vehicle or different vehicle that actually never had one, which by the way is very, very cool. So there's a reason to do that. If you make something that wasn't there before, there's something to that. There's something that should make you feel good about that. That's awesome. So if you put a blower or a turbo on something that didn't originally have that and was never offered with that, good on you, because that's an awesome deal. But just know that when you're doing it, there are going to be hurdles that you're going to have to overcome, and you have to be the right kind of person and get yourself in the right frame. That's why we're talking about this morning motivation thing. You have to put yourself in the right, in the right state, in the right mental state to be able to overcome that. These are going to happen. Things are going to happen. And you're going to have to adapt, improvise, overcome, and make this stuff happen. And that if you just go, look, I'm not stopping until this works. If you get in that frame of mind and say, look, this is happening. I'm not stopping until this happens. And you just keep going until it happens, then it does happen. And all the other things are just things that were in between your starting point and this finishing point. You say, look, I see that happening. All this other stuff is just stuff, and it's going to be pushed away and overcome and climbed over and pushed aside and welded and created, and whatever money, time, whatever the things are, you have to make that happen. And you have to decide, you have to get yourself, like I said, in the right frame of mind to decide that that's going to happen. Because it's very easy to get yourself in the frame of mind where, like, it's too cold, I don't even want to work on this. I don't like winter. That's how I am. I don't like winter. I don't want to go outside. There's no motivation for me to get all the stuff done that I need to get done. And there's less motivation during the time when it's inconvenient, when it's cold, when it's whatever. There's always some sort of other excuse that can happen, but you have to prep yourself and get yourself going. And that's what happens. So the do-it-yourself blower kits, definitely go try that. Maybe put 2 of them on something. If one of them is not enough, I still kind of want to do that on the Dodge, or on the 4.8 liter with the Holley high ram, or any kind of, even a lower manifold would be fine too, to put 2 of them on there, just because, 2 of them is twice as good and would finally give us enough airflow. Even though I could have sped the blower up quite a bit, speeding the blower up quite a bit with one of those M90 blowers on a 4.8 liter that is already making 400 horsepower, it's hard to just get something that's going to keep up. I know guys are going to tell me that, oh no, we've made 500 horsepower with these, we've made 600 horsepower, whatever. But the 1 or 2 people that have done that, and the speed that they've spun that at, and the modifications that they've made to the blower to make that happen, that's not a 600 horsepower blower. Even if somebody got 600 horsepower out of an M90, it's not a 600 horsepower blower. The vast majority of people that are spinning that are not doing that. The vast majority of those people are spinning them near 400 horsepower. Way more are doing that at 400 horsepower or less than are doing it above that. So I'm sure I'm going to get comments about that stuff. So let's see how you guys are doing in our morning motivation. Awesome job sharing all your information. Really appreciate it. You should test a 4.6 board and stroke to 4.8 against a 4.8. A 4.6 2-valve against an LS is not really much of a comparison. Not say if the person if the person on the plane has to do something stupid like tries to grab an officer or a gun. It's always a squirrels, critters, Sunday stream. Yep. Any reason to remove the passenger? People who get arrested do dumb things. Yeah, they do. I have a 327 and my 67 C20. Nice. That's the right kind of year too. Building a twin turbo 5.3 for it. That will also work. Yeah, get those likes up. How about an ultrasonic mister for water injection? I don't know if I've ever seen an ultrasonic one. 2.3 TVS and 2.65 TVS blowers about to get cheap when the new rotor pack. Is that the 3-liter one, Admiral, that they're coming out with? Something like that? Still has a factory 307 top end, sat for 30 years, no trees. My MDX is 300 horsepower all-wheel drive. Yeah, that's the thing. Modern stuff. Like if you look at a new Civic Type R, that's a completely different kind of car now than the Integra Type R was with the B18C5. Yeah, B18C5. Yeah, factory turbos, factory blower stuff is all good. And it's not, like I said, not just for the application that it's on. It's cool to have that and to be able to turn it up, because we know that they left a lot on the table. Usually with the factory turbo and factory blower stuff, the thing that ultimately becomes the limiting factor in terms of power, one, could be ring gap, although that's guys are going to argue about that, but also whatever size blower that they use. So they put a factory blower on there. You can spin that until till spinning it just brings more heat and less gains. GM sold turbos in the 60s. Not very many of them, though. Was the Corvair their only one, or did the some of the Buicks also in the 60s? Did they get those too? So Vortec V2 air-to-air intercooled is capable of 500 horsepower. On which motor? And which V2? V2 is just a family of blowers. They have lots of different size blowers that are V2s. And then what intercooler are you using? But if it's a Vortec, I haven't seen any of their intercoolers that aren't capable of supporting 500 horsepower. Yeah, we've made way more than 500 horsepower on a 4.6 liter 2 valve with a supercharger on it. Stock 5.3, what's the best performance upgrade without sacrificing mileage? A tune probably would be the best thing. Rather have the 5.3 than the 327. Too easy and too much cheaper. Took the 327 out of my 68 Chevy truck for a 450 horse 5.3 liter. I did everything to handle it. Yeah, you just need to do probably, well, what year? Oh, it's a 68. So you don't have a 4L60 in there to worry about. I did Admiral. I have a 5.3 versus a 5.4 up on the channel. What are the Sinister? What are the best springs for a sloppy best cam? Matt should have spring packages for those. I'm sure he's using a pack or something on there. Order the new Garrett G35 1050 and kind of want to compound the SRT4. Compound stuff is cool if you're, depending on what your needs are. Kevin got the edition ready for spray foam today. Good. That's a project. That's a big project. If you guys are adding a room, that's a lot of stuff. All right, Adam, we'll have fun. Holes Jetfire maybe use a 215 Buick motor. Don't know if it was aluminum or not. Just got a 4L ADE. Nice. Vortec V2 SI trim supercharger. An SI trim is capable of doing a lot more than 500 horsepower. I think an SI we've gone to 750 or something. How familiar are you with the OM606? I've never run one. I don't even know that I've ever seen one in person. So I guess the answer is not very. A few people have mentioned it on the chats, and I think that I've looked it up before. Let me verify that, because a lot of guys have mentioned. The Mercedes-Benz engine through their 6-cylinder double overhead cam. Oh, it's a diesel engine though. I haven't run any diesel engines on the engine dyno. Matt selling a new, cheaper imported sloppy best cam. Yep. Jag Stealth intake manifold for a small block Dodge. They have one now, Dodge or Jags does. Following up on my first 48 RE rebuild, it went great, and it's shifting, running perfect behind my 5.9's coming. You need to try your first transmission. So you rebuilt is that an overdrive trans then for the Cummins turbo diesel? It said they don't make the adapters anymore for the Cadillac blower because I've got a brand new one that can put on my motor. I hopefully going to ask a favor and see if you can make me a set. Somebody else was going to make those adapters too. Somebody else besides who was it? Mac Daddy Parts, I think, are the ones that I did the Cadillac deal with. They're good guys, but they were only doing a limited number of those because there were only a limited number of those blowers available. So I think that they only ran off a certain number of those, but somebody else was doing it as well. Trying to keep motivation with weights and the bike today. That's good. We're getting ready to take Milo out for we take him up in the hills. So while we're up there, I usually try to do some hill runs. Winter's my welding time on personal projects. Got all the Ross machine, aluminum runners, deep shape plenum. Very cool. I don't think ICT Billet does it. I haven't seen theirs, and I don't think Motion Raceworks were the guys too. I think it was just somebody like the Mac Daddy Parts guys. But I think it was somebody just deciding that they wanted to do that. Yep, you need to try and rebuild the 4060. I'm pretty sure I could do it. I mean, I don't think it's going to be terribly difficult. I don't think I have the tools that I need, which is why I want to take it over. Because I think Oliver has I think all we need are a few different sizes of snap ring pliers or something. The thing that I'm not familiar with is what are good upgrade pieces for when I do want to get them. Like I'm sure we're fairly certain that the sun shell's bad on it. So I don't know like if there are different offerings for different versions of that, like which ones people have used and which ones they would recommend for me to upgrade. How much power can I make with a 5.7 TBI truck? It depends on how crazy I mean, it's a small block Chevy, so the sky is the limit for how much power you could ultimately make if you change everything. But I don't know what you're wanting to do and what you're wanting to change. The TBI is going to limit you in terms of power. Would you ever choose an older 440 with maybe a Holley Sniper MS3 Pro over a 6-liter? For what? I would put a 440 if I had a Dodge thing, probably. But I wouldn't choose it necessarily over a 6-liter LS for the 240Z. I know you had an intake shootout with the LS motor. Have you ever tested out a high ram or profile intake versus a single plane with an elbow and a turbo application? The turbo application doesn't change anything. So I've tested lots of single plane intake manifolds. I've tested a single plane intake manifold with an elbow versus a 4-hole throttle body, and they make the same power, which honestly didn't surprise me, given the fact that the intake manifold is going to dictate the power, not the thing that you have going into it. So you need to look at the intake manifolds and how they compare NA and boosted, because it's the same thing. So what are the power curves offered by the ProFlow and the high ram, and then whatever single plane intake manifold you're talking about? There are differences in the single plane intake manifolds. The two-piece manifold, the mass manifold, the 4500 version of a Super Victor is different than a Victor Junior and different than a 4150 version. You have to look through all of that and go, oh, look, here are the differences in the power. And then do I want that or do I not want that? A high ram and a ProFlow in my testing were almost identical in terms of power. And both of those, I think, are better than the single plane, at least on the cathedral port stuff. I need to go back and look closely at the 4500 version of the Super Victor versus the high ram to see how that did. I kind of suspect that the high ram is a little better in some places. Snafu's here. Get the smart sun shell. That's the good one. Can you run a 4-inch bore and a 4-inch stroke and a 5.3? I don't know about the 4-inch bore. I kind of want to try it. I want to try that on the 4.8 that I have. You can physically do that. You can bore at that size, and there's still material left. That's not the question. The question is how much material is left. I don't know how thick the walls are, and it's something that you definitely want to sonic check to see what you're starting with, and then go, because maybe there are different blocks. Maybe there are different variances in castings, And then maybe there are different actual blocks that they made specifically for different years that were different. The bore size on a 5.3 aluminum block is definitely different than it is on the other aluminum blocks, than on the LS1 and the LS2 and the LS3. The wall thickness on the cylinders is definitely different. I don't know about the iron blocks. You can physically bore it. Again, I just don't know what you end up with. Do you end up with sleeves that are 100 thousandths thick, 200, 180, 170? And what point would you draw the line and go, I just wouldn't run this because it's too thin? Mexico's in the house. Russell, for towing applications, I kind of like a bigger displacement motor and an NA one over a turbo, but that's only because I mean, I've had turbo diesels that work great. I've never had a turbo gas engine that I've ever used for towing. I know that it would work. The thing that would concern me would be the tuning for something like that. It's pretty easy to tune a big NA motor and have it be really torquey down low. Well, Larry, now that you mention it, now there's not going to be a pull. There has to be a pull, right? Okay, so our poll should be okay, is a DIY blower kit better than a DIY turbo kit? So if you were going to do something and add boost, would you be more, I think I know where this is going to go. Would you be more likely to add a turbo, or would you be more likely to add a blower? I'm gonna make this specific. Is a DIY blower kit better than a DIY turbo kit for towing? We're gonna like mix it up a little bit. So we'll see what people say. What's the best head size for a 327? Well, it depends on your power needs. If you're going to run a 327 to 9 or 10,000 RPM, obviously that's going to be a different thing than if you're going to run it to 7,000 or 7,500. And then we usually pick the cylinder head for the power output and the airflow. But if you look at that 195 head that we put on there, we used the street version and not the competition ported version. So it flowed like 280, which is enough to make 560 horsepower or more. So we weren't anywhere near what that head could do. They have the comp version, which flows, I think, over 300. So you're stepping things up even more potential to go to support like 600 horsepower. So for 327, I personally would pick a 195. Snafu, there's lots of stuff I haven't tested. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in business anymore, right? I wouldn't have anything else to do. Swapping a diesel is dicey in California, but it's 1973, so I found a loophole. I can run a diesel. It would be 500 horsepower, 1,200 foot-pounds, 5.9 Cummins. Yep. You could do swaps on a vehicle that was originally equipped with a diesel that doesn't have smog. You can put other things in there then. Should they make a Cadillac to LS adapter? A Cadillac, they already make a Cadillac blower to LS adapter, so that's already, the poll's already answered. Big diesel engines use turbos. Why not gas too? What do you think of the new 7.3 motor? What is it? Godzilla motor, that seems like it's working well. The stuff that Evan Smith and Brian are doing, it's impressive stuff. I'm sticking with the Paxton on a 289/65 Ford. That's good, especially is it an original one? Turbo or supercharger for go-kart. A 400 cubic inch engine with a smallish turbo should be good for towing if properly tuned. Favorite plug for turbo LS builds. We just make sure that it's something colder. I don't have one. When we go to the auto parts store and I have to get new plugs, which I don't like doing, but we would use an NGK probably. I pray for the 7.3 and the new GT500, but it needs that boost too, though, right? My guess is like with Dodge, which kind of surprised me going away from the bigger motors, that we might start seeing that with everybody. There'll be smaller motors, but much higher specific outputs. So what are we looking at with our votes? Everybody get out and vote. 122 people here. Is a DIY blower better than a DIY turbo kit for towing? So 58% are saying no. Donnie, the 122 blower for the Cadillac, I really liked it back before I did the videos on it and then made them really expensive. And also, I actually don't like the way that the adapters have to be. It has to be by design because that blower obviously was designed to do something else. I would like to have that displacement blower, but I just wish the intake portion of that was better. And so that didn't have to have adapters that had a dramatic change in like what the airflow is doing. It worked well, but the kit that I have that has that Ford blower on the kit that Tom did, I like the way that mates up much better. Would a positive blower be better for towing than a centrifugal blower? More than likely, a Roots blower or a twin screw blower, a positive displacement blower would be what I would pick for. If I was picking a blower, it would be what I would pick for towing, because it's going to have lots more low speed power. It'd be nice if you had a positive displacement blower and runner length, which you normally can't get both of those things. It would be good, but the blower seems to add enough that even though you're dropping 40 or 50 foot-pounds or whatever from the intake manifold, you're gaining more than that from the blower. So it's a pretty good trade-off. Kenny Bell stuff is good. RB35. I have an RB25. So I'm partway there. You think flat plane cranks will show up in more production cars? I don't think so. I think it's just way too problematic and it's just, there's no gain there. The blowers are boost by RPM, but they're also boost by load too, because that's dictated by the blow off valve. What's easier to install for the beginner? Well, if it's a turbo kit, well, a DIY thing, I think it's going to be probably easier to do a turbo. But if they're kits, I think a blower is usually easier to install than a turbo. The hot rod community needs a Richard Holder turbo kit complete. Complete for what, though? That's the problem. Is if I did one turbo kit for something, they would want them for every other thing. Even if you did an LS, it's not going to fit every LS. It's not going to fit all of the trucks and all the cars and all the SUVs. And it's just, that's why there are turbo kits. Roots or twin screw for autocross. In my opinion, you'd have to look at which specific ones you're talking about, which sizes you're looking at. A twin screw and a Roots are going to provide very, very similar response rates and stuff. And probably if that's going into V8 for autocross, you're going to be looking at a traction limiting thing anyways. Kind of want an old 350 diesel gas converted with Cadillac EFI and a GT45. Good. Like the simplicity of a centrifugal, especially when they really made huge strides. And I think probably ProCharger did this, although Paxton had this also early on. So before any of those guys even came out, before Vortec and ProCharger, before any of those guys came out, the Paxton already had this. But when the blower is self-contained and you don't have to drill a drain hole for the oiling, you have to have oiling to the blower and then a drain for that. As soon as they went to these self-contained versions, and that were better than the planetary drive in the Paxton, which tended to generate a lot of heat, so much so that they eventually had the little, if you've ever seen the little 2-hose dipstick that they run in there and then run a pump to circulate it out through a cooler and go back in, because it's a self-contained amount of fluid and it's a planetary drive which generates lots of heat. So they were trying to cool it off by doing this, and maybe that was kind of successful, but ultimately it was they got this stuff worked out. And then there's lots of superchargers, both from Vortec, or the centrifugal stuff from Vortec and from ProCharger, that are self-contained and will last. Because I remember talking to the guys at ProCharger about this after I did the Silver State a few times with my Vortec, and I'm like, look, I said, I know that this is very unusual, that 99.999% of the people are not going to be doing this. I said, but I go out and run this thing at wide open throttle under load, where it's doing that for 30 or 40 minutes. I said, will a self-contained blower not heat up and kill itself if I do that? And they're like, we don't know. we've never tried that. I said, I know, nobody ever tries that. I'm the only one that's dumb enough to do that, because we know that the oil, having fresh oil going through it all the time and then draining out, that there was no problem, at least with the Vortec. I didn't know, and probably now it's probably would not be a problem, but did you use the Turbo Smart wastegate they showed at SEMA? I didn't go to SEMA, so I don't know which one you're talking about. And the wastegates that I use are probably, these are the Gen 5 ones, so these are probably 3 or 4 years old. And before that, I just had their previous version of the 45 millimeter Hypergates. Nitrous is also very easy. Tom, you're putting the H22 back together. Good luck, man. Paxton was made by supercharging Y blocks and T-birds. Actually, the Paxton supercharger was, and McCullough superchargers, they were using those before they put them on automotive applications. Randy just picked up an L33 in front of a Tremec TKO 5-speed. It's going in a lowered 5-lug, 3,250-pound Tacoma. My daily recommended the truck Norris cam. That's probably a good choice for that. Root style, I'm sure, is going to be cheaper than twin screw, so the performance is similar. What I said was the boost response is similar. For any given size, a twin screw is going to make more power than a Roots does. It's going to have, especially the Kenny Bell stuff, because the Kenny Bell stuff, not only is it twin screw, but it has a 4x6 rotor pack. So the rotor pack is different even than Whipple is. And so if you run them at the same, you need to test this like on a blower stand, but if you run them at the same, depending on how you want to measure them, but a twin screw will flow more than the same size Roots blower will, and it will do it at a lower charge temperature and with less parasitic drive associated with driving the blower. Recal, thanks very much. How's our it's shifting now. The no's are saying 51% that is a blower kit better than a DIY turbo kit, but the yeses are actually coming on strong. It's actually started out at less, but now the yeses are coming on, so we're getting a little closer to 50-50. Richard, I think it's time you linked up with somebody and make your own cams. Probably not going to do that. I may have some signature series ones that people have talked to me about, so that might be something that down the line. Alcoa, when you ask a question, make sure that you do not have the word thoughts in it. That's not acceptable here. Uh-oh, our poll is back down to 50-50 now, or back up, depending on which direction you were coming from. So now we're 50% blower and 50% turbo. So get in there and rock the vote. No Hollywood. No Hollyweird. The signature series cams would just be something that if they were cams that I would want to do, that I know would work and that I know would help. So if we'll see if that even transpires. Kenny Bell should develop a battery-powered supercharger for quarter-mile passes, but mechanically operated otherwise. So you want to get rid of all the parasitic losses. That would be nice if they could do that, because it could be 100, 200, 300 horsepower, depending on how much you're trying to spin it. But the battery-powered thing, the problem is that the electric motor that we were talking about trying to drive that with, that electric motor is pretty serious. Imagine what a 200 horsepower electric motor is like. They switch to winter E85 now. We get E70 till it gets warm. But in reality, E70 is not going to be a huge step down from E85, not in terms of power potential. So it's not like that's a big thing. E70 is still awesome. Donnie, just don't label them as NA cams or turbo cams or whatever. Mine would be different. And one of the things I was going through here recently is I'm trying to make a list of all of the cams that I've tested with under boost, basically either turbo or supercharged versions. I want to make a list of all of the ones that I've tested that are not turbo or blower cams. And then the ones that I have tested are turbo and blower cams. And I bet you one list is a lot longer than the other list. All of the ones that are not supposed to be turbo or blower cams, that list of cams is going to be much, much longer of all the things that I've run than the turbo or blower cams that are specific, because they all work. My problem with the word thoughts is it's just an open-ended question. It's like, oh, hey, World War II, thoughts. There's way too much there. And there's way too much in answering a question about, should I use these injectors? What are your thoughts? Just ask a specific question and I'll do everything I can to answer it. And that's just me. And if it's okay, if you don't want to ask a question because this guy doesn't like the word thoughts in it, then don't ask it. I'm okay with that too. La Bonneville's 30 minutes away. I just drove through there recently when I went out to Ohio. Make a +5 horsepower sticker. Yeah, I definitely would go get, if you're talking about a crank sensor, I definitely would go try a junkyard crank sensor before I would go buy a new one. Russell, I'm going to scroll back and look at your thing. I don't remember. You can isolate the heat. Oh, I know why I didn't answer your question. We all know why. Russell, I was referring to high inlet air temps and also high EGTs with DIY turbo kits. If sized properly, along with isolating the heat from the turbo will be muy bueno. I don't think you're understanding what's happening with the turbo, maybe. The heat generated by a turbo is from compression. The heat is not being transferred from the hot side of the turbo to the cold side and then into the air intake. That percentage of heat that's coming from that and going into the inlet side is tiny. It's almost nothing. So you don't have to really worry about that. And then the EGTs are going to be a function of much more than that, much more than the inlet temperature. The inlet temperature is one thing. We can adjust EGTs by changing timing way more than we can by changing the inlet air temps, because the EGTs are going to go up on a turbo application because we have much less timing than we do naturally aspirated. Got our first snow in Ohio. Cool. Hopefully my Omni is inside and not out in the snow. Porsche's coming out with an electric turbo with a generator primary so they can separate the hot and cold sides. If they're running an electric turbo, they're not doing it to eliminate the temperature. If they're doing an electric turbo, they're doing it so they can eliminate the parasitic any sort of loss, probably with driving that turbo. Although I think that's got to be minimum too. Is there a boost limit you try to keep under when running turbos on stock plastic intakes? I think we've run 28 or 29 pounds on the stock plastic intake manifold. So they're not going to, blowing up a stock intake manifold with boost is not really going to be too much of a problem. Blowing it up if you backfire it is going to be a real problem. It's like the instantaneous pressure spikes that tend to destroy them. I have broken plastic intake manifolds with with nitrous backfires. Why is this here? If people run 8 psi in a Buick 3800 with a supercharger, can I run 8 psi from a turbo without an intercooler? Yes, you can. It's not as good and it doesn't make as much power, but you can. Why do we run less timing in an LS motor versus a small block? Because of the chamber design. The chamber design responds or does not respond to timing. More timing isn't better. So you need to put that out of your head right away. Less timing is actually better. The less timing your chamber requires or responds to, the more efficient the chamber is. So on a small block Chevy, especially some of the big chamber ones, and for instance, if we look at a 317 head versus a 706 head, a 317 head needs more timing because it's not nearly as efficient. It's also bigger, but it's not as efficient either. So the same thing with the small blocks and big blocks as well. They require more timing because the LS chamber is a better design. That's right. They could also be doing it to get better response rate of the turbo. If you could spool it and have it spooled all the time, then the amount of power that it could deliver at any given throttle angle would be better. Richard, have you ever done a test between crossover pipes? I haven't made specific just changing the crossover tubes, but 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 3-inch, I don't think you're going to see anything there because I don't think that that's a restriction. I think that the turbo is still the restriction in that system and not the crossover tube. That's my opinion. I voted turbo for towing, but either would do it if it's set up correctly. After changing heads on my small block Chevy, I did notice it wanted different timing. This is especially the case if you look at a Vortec head, a relatively more modern Vortec head compared to an old Fuelie head, or especially the smog heads. A Vortec head wants less timing too. Which Holly standalone system is the best to turbocharge a fuel-injected V8 Audi? I don't know what pricing you're talking about. But does the Audi have variable cam timing or drive-by-wire? I don't know what other things it has. Oh, Russell, I must have misinterpreted what you were saying about that. But it's a good thing to talk about anyway. It's better to have a big turbo and a partial hybrid system to get off the line while the turbo is lagging and then have the big turbo top end. I feel like blower for towing is so much low-end stress on the rods. I don't know how you're going to get around that if you're wanting more low-speed torque. But you're talking about running 7 pounds or something when you're towing. You're not talking about running 1,000,000 foot-pounds. I would really like to have, like in my truck, especially when we had the boat, it would have been cool to have a little roots blower on there, like a 112 or 122 or something like that. Even something that's just running like 7 pounds. It would have been cool to have that and have another 150 foot-pounds of torque or whatever, you know, in the range that you're using it. Because that truck's probably never seen 6,500. It's probably never seen 6,000 either at full throttle. What were the double hump heads? Those were the Fuelie heads. And there were a lot of different guys will tell you that, oh no, the Fuelie heads only had on the fuel injected motors and didn't have accessory holes and yada, 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 yada. There were about 4 different casting numbers that all did the same thing. Get away, you're late, but you're shopping for food. Magnets for the streetcars. Yeah, that's nice. I would rather have that. And I had a Vortec on my Mustang and I loved it for a long time. But for that, at up to 5,000 RPM or 5,500 or whatever, a roots blower or a Kenny Bell or something would just be awesome. I would like to have I would definitely want an intercooled version, would be much better. But I'd also want an intercooled supercharged 5.3 cam, because you'd have to have a cam in it too, a small one. Capable transmission though, that would be the thing. Like putting the motor parts together, that would be easy. 3D, welcome. 48% are in disagreement with you. So we shifted it's back to 49.51. It was 48 there for a while. Kicking, I've never done, I don't think I've ever tested anything from Speedway Motors. TPI with a centrifugal for a truck, I don't think that's a good choice. I mean, if you want to make your tune port better, and adding boost to it is definitely a way to go. But having 2 pounds down low where you're going to use it and then 6 pounds at the top, it'd be better if it was reversed, actually. But a tune port is a good truck motor. .3D, I've never tested any of the on3 stuff, but twin 61s on a 4.6 4 valve, that's fine. We ran twin 46s on the way back from HP Performance, and then twin 57s. And I think the twin 57s that we did were up near 1,000 horsepower with the 03 Cobra motor. Correctly sized turbo that doesn't have the parasitic draw of a supercharger would be better, in my opinion. It would be better for power. At any given boost level, the turbo would definitely make more power. Would you rebuild a Buick 455 or put a rebuilt Gen 6 454 in an Electra? I think I would go with the 455 in the Electra. Do you know if there are 440 pistons that fit the stock rods that will raise the compression? Used heads, $1,000. Pistons, 450. EFI intake, cam, fuel system, and ECU. I don't think you're going to be able to build a 440 for what you could put together a turbo 5.3 for. I don't, from a cost standpoint, I think that you're better off doing rather than rebuilding a 440, just go get a Gen 6 454 and you could put that in. That's true, but it would be difficult to put centrifugal on a TPI. It's not. They made kits for them. We've run them a lot. Never seen a double hump 194s. A true Fuelie head does not have 194. It's not a small valve head. They made small valve, small block heads back when they made these 202 160 heads. They made the real Fuelie heads. A Fuelie head is going to be like a 186. It's going to be a 290, not a 292. It's like an 041. I have to go through because I remember I went through the search when I had to put all the heads on, because the 302 and the 327 and the LT1 were all different heads, even though they did exactly the same thing, but they all had different casting numbers, but they are all the same thing. Same size chamber, same chamber, same flow rate, same valve size. I mean, they were essentially the same kind of head. I haven't ever run the on3 stuff, but the turbo sizing is the turbo sizing, so those will certainly support 1,000 horsepower. Oh, to put a roots on a tune port, that would be harder to do. Pulse 50-50, isn't that almost as unlikely as 100%? The 50-50 seems to be easier to achieve than 100%. Have you run boost on the 8.1? Yes, that video's up. What about turbo feeding a positive displacement blower? We've already done that. That's on the 3800. That video's up. Richard, I know you do a lot of 4.6 2-valve content. In your opinion, what would be a spicy combo for the Crown Vic? Just take a look at all the 2.2 stuff I have up. Pick one. Just ported heads, cam, intake manifold, turbos, blower works, lots of good stuff. Would my little 471 on a small block Chevy be good for towing my 28-foot enclosed trailer with a 3,300-pound load? I think the 427 is going to be undersized a little bit for that, unless the small block Chevy is fairly mild to begin with. Old Barn Shop, greeting from Iowa. What's up? I have a 77 400 Mopar to make a 451. Do I just need a 440 crank, rods, or both? Do I need the 440 flywheel or balancer? What do I need to turn my 400 into a 451? I'm actually not that familiar with the 400 Mopar. I mean, I know what it is, and I know its history and stuff, but I don't know what all the stroker combinations are for the 400. I'd actually have to look that up to find out. If anybody here knows, please answer Old Barn Shop. 461s and 62s, yep. And 186s and 041s. Outlaw 327 with a 671 at 17 pounds. That's a lot of boost. Hopefully does it have good fuel in it? Oh, C23, okay. And how much camshaft is in that thing? But a 671, a really good 671 could be 1,000 horsepower blower if it's a stripped like blower shop deal. If it's less than that, it's going to be more in the 800 to 900 range. I don't think you're there though with that combination. Carl, good luck on your new job. I have a Gen 3 5.3. Should I get my hands on a Gen 4? Just have stronger rods. It depends on what you're trying to do with it, but we've made 1,000 horsepower stuff out of Gen 3s, lots and lots. Won't Vortec heads bolt on a TPI block? Yeah, but so will every other small block. And there, I don't know if people have roots blowers for Vortec manifolds or for Vortec heads, but I know that they have roots blowers for the earlier heads. So if you were going to do that, probably be better off just get a set of inexpensive aluminum heads for it. Check out Source 440. They have some 400 combos. For 041 and 186s on the fuel injected Corvettes, though I don't remember. I'd have to look that up. It's been a while since I ran those tests. We're going to go ahead and close out our poll with 51% saying no, that the blower kit is better than the turbo kit. So most leaning slightly towards the turbo adjacent, I guess. So we'll end our poll there. And one more minute. Milo's waiting for me. He wants me to take him outside. Richard, this will be the last question. Well, 2001 GMC 1500 5.3 liter. 2011 is still an LS 5.3, right? Will it need the VVT removed for a truck Norris cam? Yes, you cannot run the truck Norris cam with VVT. You have to get a VVT specific cam, and it's going to be smaller. And a lot of times with the VVT stuff, what they do is narrow the amount that you can adjust it, because when you put the bigger cam in, then we get closer to piston to valve clearance. And then if we advance it or retard it, especially if we advance it, we tend to get even closer toward having no piston to valve clearance. So the combination of those things means that you can't really swing that cam. And also the camshaft itself might not lend itself to getting gains that way. So what they tend to do on the VVT cams is narrow the amount that you're allowed to do it, or sometimes they just lock it all together. And on that note, it's time to get going. Please go take a look at the video that I put up on the 5.3 versus the 327. Good stuff. And then I will see you guys all tonight.